Welcome. This is the video for the in-class activity on July 10th. So hopefully the game design project is going well. Hopefully you're well into it by now. You've decided what software you're going to use, and your team is actively working together to take all those ideas that you've had and bring them to light. So what we're going to do over the next 3 days is we are going to focus on lateral thinking. Now, lateral thinking is its own kind of thinking strategy. It falls within the umbrella of creative thinking, but you could think of it um, if creative thinking is the military, then lateral thinking is kind of the special forces, where it's not um, exactly right for every single problem, but where you do apply it, it can get the job done in ways that nothing else can. And you can also think of lateral thinking not so much as a cohesive group of um, tools, but I like to think of it as kind of a bag of tricks, that there are certain specific tricks that I can pull out and say, okay, I'm going to try this one and see what happens, or I'm going to try this other one and see what happens. Sometimes you can use um, a number of different lateral thinking techniques on a given problem. Sometimes it makes more sense to use one particular one over some of the others. So we'll get into that, but that's what we're going to do today. And I've broken it into 3 different sections. So there's a number of different techniques that you can learn within lateral thinking. For this course, I'm only going to teach you what I feel are the 3 most effective. And just depending on how you use them, some of the others might be helpful. But I think based on all the other techniques that we're learning, um, some elements of them fall into the other thinking strategies, at least indirectly. But these 3 especially, I feel are very powerful and very easy to remember and easy to use. And I've had the most success with them. So I want to share them with you, give you some examples of how to use them. And then over these next 3 courses, we're going to tackle a specific problem. And so that's what you'll turn in is you'll use the specific technique that we learned that day, and then you're going to apply it to a problem that we're going to look at in these 3 different ways over the next 3 days. And that problem is rush hour. And so again, watch this video, follow along, and then you're going to give it a shot on what we've learned applying it to rush hour. So for that, what you'll need, so what you'll turn in today is you'll respond to this discussion like we've been, team names, student names, first and last, include your selfie, and then you're going to answer these questions. Now, in order to know what in the world this is talking about, we're going to walk through how to actually complete this. So we're going to need this worksheet here. So I want you to click on the worksheet and it'll download a Word document that you'll be able to look at and fill out, and we'll go through together. Also, I think it would be good to, just as context, we're going to look at this that I found this week. Just in case you didn't think rush hour was a big deal, what we think of as rush hour is nothing compared to what some areas of the world, and we meaning anyone in America, so even places like New York and LA, they can have bad rush hour, but it's just insane other places. So we're going to look at that. So hopefully you've downloaded the worksheet. We're going to go here. So what we're going to learn today is called the Lateral Thinking Random Word Idea Generator. Be nice if there's a better name for it. Maybe one of you can come up with that. But it's a very interesting technique. It's almost a psychological hack that you do to your own brain. And so the best example I've found, it's incredibly lame, but it's very effective, is this YouTube link. So what I want you to do now is to pause this video and click on this link, which should take you to this video here. So pause this, watch that, and then come back. Okay, so now that you've watched this video and you understand that the basics of that, I'm tempted to go through an example of the rush hour with you using that. But instead, without giving you too many of my ideas, I want to see how the different teams do it on their own, just based off of watching this video and following suit. What I do want to add, though, is why this technique is effective. So when you look at the random word idea generator, the effectiveness stems from the fact that our brain is, even though we think of our brain as the core of intelligence, it's really only good, or really, really good at a couple of different things. And they just happen to be very helpful to us. And the biggest thing it's good at is recognizing patterns and making sense of the world. Because if you think about your brain is just this chunk of flesh that's within your skull. So it doesn't even know what light is. It has never experienced that. All your brain experiences is a series of electrical signals, chemical signals that come to it from its different sensors. So if you can think of your eyes as sensors, taste as a sensor, touch as a sensor, all of those different things. And then within those, they create experiences and memories and biases. And so all those things come from essentially a bunch of electrical signals. And so our brain has to be very good at not only interpreting those signals, but finding patterns so it can make sense of the world. And at some point, I'll show you a video on how we're learning just how amazing our brain is at taking random symbols and without teaching it anything, having it look through different signals, like with a haptic vest, where it vibrates in a certain way, and being able to tease out meaning behind it, again, without any actual training of, hey, this combination of vibrations means this. It's able to figure that out. So it's pretty amazing. And the downside of that is, even if there isn't a pattern, it will try and find one. It doesn't like chaos in that sense. And that's why someone can write something, and I'm sure you've seen those where it's a few sentences and everything is horribly misspelled, and yet most people can read it with only slowing down just a little bit, because your brain autocorrects as it goes. And unfortunately, when we're reading our own work, since our brain is familiar with it, since we are the ones who wrote it, it will autocorrect without letting us know that it's doing that. And so we'll pass over a number of the mistakes that we've written. And that's why it's good to have someone else proofread your work, because it's all new to them, so their brain won't pass over the mistakes as much, although it'll still do it. So because of that, because of knowing that flaw in our brain, but also that strength, what the random word idea generator does is it forces us to take something completely unassociated with what it is we're trying to fix or improve, or these ideas we're trying to do. We pick something purposefully unrelated, and we force our brain to make connections. And when it does that, it's able to come up with things that we wouldn't logically be able to find on our own. So if you think about just normal creative thinking and brainstorming as fishing off the side of a boat with a fishing pole, we're able to make connections that are close to us, close to what we're talking about. And even the mashup that we did when we were coming up with ideas for the games, even that mashup, it was a little bit more creative and certainly effective in its own way, but it didn't go as far as what we're going to go today. And so what we want to do is, instead of just fishing off the side of the boat, we want to cast a net using a pneumatic cannon that launches it way out there. And instead of looking all around our boat, but just near our boat, it forces us to throw it way out there, and it's completely unrelated to where we are. And then our brain's job is to pull in that net. And so it forces a connection where there really shouldn't be a connection. And because it does that, we might come up with some absurd things and some things that don't make sense. But within that mix, we're also going to come up with some very unique ideas that we would not have been able to think of before. So in some ways, it'll be similar to that mashup, but even more specific and extreme. So with that, what you'll do is you need to talk through the problem you're going to solve, which is rush hour. So you need to first, in order to make sure that we're all on the same page, talk about what rush hour is. And then, you can talk through some of the causes of rush hour and look through that. That's kind of getting into the solutions. But we at least need to know what rush hour is. And I would define rush hour as the period of time each workday, morning and evening, where there are more vehicles or people in an area than that area is able to effectively handle, thereby increasing the wait time and the stress levels and the usage of gasoline and the increased risk of having accidents for that group of people because they're all there at the same time. And when thinking about rush hour, the alternate way to think about it is what happens the rest of the time? What happens at 2 in the morning on a given road? Is it perfectly fine? Can you go somewhere without heavy weight? And if so, it indicates that that road is actually okay. It's not too small for the group of people that live there. They're just all there at the same time in that chunk of that period of time in the morning and in the evening. So I want you to look at rush hour as this unnecessary or at least wasteful chunk of time where a road that is in some parts of the day underutilized because I can go somewhere without cars being around me and I can go at full speed and have space in between and not have a problem. Other times I'm bumper to bumper or going very slow. So I want you to think about rush hour like that. And as a special treat, I wanted to show you this link, which is on the page that you started from. And you can watch the videos, and I'd encourage you to because it's a little mind-boggling. So this is the Beijing subway where they get a little violent. The guys in the yellow coats are helping to make sure that the train can move. So you see them shoving some people in, pulling some people out, and fighting other people to get the doors closed. Here's a little clip from Thailand. You see that there's a lot of motorcycles. They don't really care about where you're supposed to stop because they're basically in the intersection to begin with. Here's Malaysia, and there are actually a couple spots in China where some drones have taken kind of overhead views of 50-lane highways that are jammed up because the 50-lane highway is turning into a mere 20-lane highway. And there have been several times where there were backups for 2 to 3 days where it was just completely stuck. And then people started abandoning their cars and it made it worse. And I honestly don't know if they have yet to figure out the problem, but they have some really bad issues there. Now in Japan, similar to China, but I think they're a lot more polite about it. They have these kind of ushers who are, I don't know the official name, but their job is to shove people into the train. So they're very kind about it, but because they ask them ahead of time. And then you see them in this video, and they are putting their shoulders into it. They're just trying to cram all the people in so that they can actually get the train moving. Here's India. India is interesting because they have a mix of technologies where you have cars and growing number of cars that the country hasn't been used to over a long period of time. Then you also have a lot of a lot of motorcycles, a lot of bicycles, and even still a lot of animals in areas, and all fighting for the same roadway. Here's another part in India where on the trains, a lot of people grab on. Um, I'm assuming in part to get a free ride, but mainly because the trains are absolutely full. And here's a shot of Vietnam, all the people. And then here's Indonesia, where you have this probably dangerous mix of what looks like some motocross activity, but it's really just people trying to get to work, mixed in with a bunch of cars. um, Taiwan. So it's fun to watch because you can see it all moving. Manila in the Philippines. My wife has spent some time there and has actually driven in this mess with a 15-passenger van. And I got to see some video of it, and it was. I'm glad I saw it after she came back because it was pretty crazy. And then here's a famous spot in Tokyo where there's a ton of different crosswalks, and you just have this mass movement of people um, when it's their turn to walk. So that's what I want to show you for rush hour. Now, what I want you to, so now that you realize it's a problem, I want you to think specifically in terms of um, rush hour in Phoenix if you need to limit it. But it doesn't necessarily need to be limited in terms of scope. But if it helps, you could think about trying to solve that problem within Phoenix. So what I want you to do is, given that that's our problem, I want you to select a random word. And really, it shouldn't be a transportation related word. We really want to take something completely different from what we're looking at. And then we want to take that word and we want to forget about the concept of rush hour for a minute. We just want to think about that word. And then with that word, we want to list as many characteristics of the word as possible. So think through attributes of how it moves, how it looks, different things that make it unique, maybe a problem that it has, limitations, um, different types of behaviors that it has, and list down at least 10 of those. Then, once you get those characteristics, I want you to get rid of that random word and forget about it. Because now we have what we need from it. We can get rid of it so we don't associate these characteristics with that random word anymore. We want to take just those characteristics, and these are our fishing nets. We want to take these characteristics, throw away the random words, we just have these pure characteristics, and then we want to take those and bring back our problem, which is rush hour. Take that and then force these characteristics to generate new ideas about how to fix the problem of rush hour. And so, like in the video with the frog and the motorcycle that you saw, I want you to apply those characteristics. Now, you can apply them in many different ways, and I would encourage you not to get stuck on where you're going. Just like with the creative exercise, the goal is to come up with new ideas. So if you have to bend or break the rules a little bit to get there, if you're following a trail that leads you there, that's okay. But when you take a characteristic and you apply it to the problem you're trying to solve, I want you to think of different ways to apply it, either metaphorically, how would that look on the problem we're trying to solve as a solution, but even getting fuzzier in terms of, say that word was slippery. We could look at, hey, that means it can move fast, it could be hard to hold, it could be slippery in terms of untrustworthy. Looking at all those different elements, and then another trick with that is to look at the opposite of that characteristic. So again, if we're looking slippery for whatever reason, you could look at what is non-slippery. Oh, it's a solid grip. It's stable. So looking at all those things and then trying to force your brain. Again, these are those fishing nets that we've shot way out from the boat. And we need to force our brain to pull in that net and find what sort of solutions it can come up with to the problem of rush hour using those characteristics. And then I want you to list those ideas that you were able to come up with, and I want to see how you do. And we may do this live as a class depending on what you guys come up with for a different example. But I think that based on what we've practiced before with the game mashup, but now specifically with this, I'm curious to see what ideas you come up with that are truly unique. So again, this responding to this is basically the same as what's in that Word document. So respond to that and put in that information again about rush hour, but select a random word completely unrelated to rush hour, put it together, and then we'll see what you come up with. All right, so that's it for the random word generator. Next time we will look at our second primary technique for our lateral thinking module.